Hey Optimancers, Treantmonk here. Today we're going to be doing my second wizard build. This is the Augur build. This is a diviner build with a little bit of knowledge cleric thrown in. Now, when I did this build, my original intent was to do one level of knowledge cleric and then 19 levels of diviner wizard. Now, what I've discovered is once we get to that 18th level of wizard, the 19th level doesn't really give us very much. But going back into knowledge cleric actually gives us a little bit. So in the end, once we're 20th level, it's going to be 2 levels of knowledge cleric and 18 levels of diviner wizard. But for the most part of this career, we're talking about a 1 level dip in cleric and then wizard. Now this video, I'm going to be splitting it into 3 parts. We're going to do what we call tier 1 if you're an Adventures League player, then a tier 2 video, then tier 3 and 4 combined. For non-Adventure League players, that means the first video we're going to cover character creation and then leveling up to level 4. The second video we'll talk about levels 5 through 10, and then the third video we will talk about the rest of the career after that. Now, just a little bit of overview of this build. This is what I call a God Wizard build. This is kind of the classic God Wizard build. So we're not going to be doing melee at all with this character. We're going to avoid it as much as we can. And when I pick spells in this, I'm going to be considering that my character is going to want to have good maneuverability so that they can stay at range. And then I'm not worried as much about defense as I was, say, with the Blade Singer, where I was expecting to be in melee a lot. Now, that doesn't mean we ignore defense. This is still going to be very strong defensively. But when we're looking at spell selection and spell preparation, the fact that this character is likely going to be out of melee and likely going to be attacked less often than, say, a Blade Singer is going to affect those decisions. I have to say that Diviner, I hear more often than any other subclass, is people's favorite wizard subclass, and I agree. Diviner is my favorite subclass for Wizard. This is probably my favorite build for Wizard out of all 10 builds I'm going to be showing with you guys. So I'm kind of excited. Let's get started. Okay, so we're going to get our build started. The first thing we're going to do is I'm on D&D Beyond. This is where I make all my characters. And I'm just going to remind everyone that I always link my characters in the video description. So if you want to see this character sheet, once it's complete, you can click that link and it will take you to it. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to get rid of all the homebrew stuff. We're going to get rid of the homebrew content. We'll get rid of the Magic, the Gathering stuff, and the Eberron content. I think I called it Eberron last time, and people were telling me that it's pronounced Eberron, so we'll get rid of the Eberron content. Now we're going to choose our race, and with this build, I'm going to be taking Variant Human, but I do want to say that no matter what race you play, it works reasonably well with this build, especially anything that gets a bonus to intelligence. You can make this build work just fine with any of those races. Any of the races that are normally good for Wizard are good here. Now I'm going to be doing the Variant Human. Now one thing to note here is the Variant Human is a player's handbook race. Diviner is a player's handbook subclass. Knowledge Cleric is a player's handbook subclass. And I'll be taking some spells from Xanathar. So this build is already Adventures League friendly, so you don't need to worry about doing any adjustments to spell selection like we had to do with the Blade Singer. So there's a few reasons why I like Variant Human for Wizard. The first is because we can choose the 2 ability scores that we're going to give our +1 to, we can make one of them intelligence and then we make one either dexterity or constitution, and that's going to give us ability score boosts where we need them. We don't care about ability score boosts in like charisma or strength, and that's one of the reasons why the regular human doesn't appeal to me so much. The other thing is the Variant Human is getting additional things. They're going to get additional skill, which we can use to take perception. They're going to get an additional feat, and that feat is, of course, is really important for a wizard. Now, because we're a human, we're not going to get things like dark vision, for example, but because we are a wizard, if we wanted to, we could select spells that are going to provide those things for us. So we could just take the dark vision spell, for example. So in some ways, Variant Humans work better as spellcasters than they do as non-spellcasters, because we can often supplement those racial abilities that we're not getting. So as the variant human, we will get a bonus language, and again, depends on your campaign. So I can't really tell you what languages you should consider with your character. So generally with these builds, I just take whatever. I'll take Elvish here. Now I'm going to get ability score increases, and the first one needs to be intelligence. And the next one can either be dexterity or constitution, and it doesn't matter. We're going to end up with a 14 in both those scores regardless. Then we're going to get a bonus skill, and the skill I will almost always take is perception, because perception is by far the most used skill in the game. And finally, we're going to get our feat selection. Now, there's a few different routes I could go here, because generally with variant human, I'm going to want to boost my concentration saves. And there are a few ways we can do that. We could do a resilient constitution, and that would give us a +1 constitution modifier, in addition to making us proficient with constitution saving throws. So that is pretty good. Then we could also take lucky, and lucky would allow us to re-roll rolls that otherwise might have failed. And that one is tempting too, but I really do think the best choice here is still the Warcaster feat. The Warcaster feat does 3 things for us, and the first one is that when we take an attack of opportunity, we can use a spell instead. Now with this character, I wouldn't expect to have an attack of opportunity throughout the entire campaign, because we're positioning ourselves away from melee. Usually if we end up in melee, it's because they came to us, not us going to them. They don't want to leave melee with us. We're not getting attacks of opportunity. So that ability is wasted. Another one of the abilities is we're going to get advantage on saving throws for concentration when we take damage. Most concentration saves we make, that's the reason why. So when a Warcaster gives you that advantage, usually it means that pretty much every concentration save you make, you will have advantage on. At low levels, that gives you a better chance of success than being proficient in Constitution. So the lower levels, Warcaster provides a bigger boost to concentration saves than Resilient Constitution does. Now with Lucky, we can essentially get advantage as well, but the reason we want Warcaster is for the other ability. The other ability is that when our hands are full, as in with weapons or shields or whatever, we are able to do the somatic components for our spells. Now this character will be using a shield, so that right away, that's one hand that's full. Now at low levels, we're going to have a free hand, and that free hand could do somatic components, it could access material components. But when we get to higher levels, what happens is you tend to get wands or staffs or whatever. And those can function as an arcane focus for our spells, but what they don't do is they don't allow us to complete a spell that has a somatic component, but no material component, because focuses are weird. The way they work is if you are holding an arcane focus and you have a spell with a material component, you can cast that spell. If you have a spell with a material and a somatic component, it is assumed you can complete the somatic component of that spell with the hand holding the arcane focus. But if the spell doesn't have a material component but does have a somatic component, then you can't complete the somatic component with the hand that's holding the arcane focus. So what ends up happening is you get attacked and you want to cast the shield spell. The shield spell has a verbal component and a somatic component, but no material component. So that means that if I'm holding a shield and I have maybe my spell staff in the other hand, I can't cast shield. And because it's not my turn, I can't drop the staff. So we definitely want to take care of that. And the Warcaster feat is the way to do it. Now, it is entirely possible that you play at a table where your DM doesn't care about those kinds of things. A lot of DMs are going to just let you, if you're holding an arcane focus, you can cast your spells. I'm just playing by the rules here, and often I care more about these things than my own DM cares about these things, because I tend to be anal about following the rules for components, and my DMs often aren't. But with these builds, I want to do them by the rules, and by the rules, if you want to use a spell with a somatic component and no material component, even if you're holding an arcane focus, if your hands are full, you can't cast that spell. So we're going to go into our ability scores, and here I am going to use a point buy. I said I would be using standard array for some of my builds, and I will do standard array for some of my builds, but this one really does work better with the point buy. Because we are multi-classing, we have minimum ability score requirements. Specifically, we need to have a wisdom score of 13 and an intelligence score of 13. Now, we're easily going to have that intelligence score of 13, but we normally wouldn't worry about getting our wisdom to 13. With this character, we need to do that, and a point buy is going to make that easier for us. So we'll make the 13 wisdom the first first buy we do. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to get our intelligence up to 16. So we're going to get a 15 intelligence plus 1 from very inhuman, gets us a 16. And the next thing we want is we want a dexterity of 14 and a constitution of 14. Now I already have a bonus of plus 1 to my constitution because of variant human, so a 13 will do the trick, and then a dexterity we're going to want 14. And that only leaves us 1 point left. And it doesn't matter where you put that because we have a strength of 8, charisma of 8, plus 1 doesn't do anything in either of those cases, and we're never going to raise either of them. So I'll just go ahead and raise my strength to 9, but you can raise your charisma to 9 if you like. So then we're going to go into our class, and the first class we're going to pick is Cleric. It's not Wizard. So this character will begin as a Cleric. What we're going to get with Cleric is, first off, we're going to get proficiencies that we want with this character. We're going to get proficiency in medium armor and shields, and this character will use a shield. Now a shield is going to give us a plus 2 bonus to armor class, and of course at higher levels very likely we're going to get magic shields, and then it's going to give us even more than a plus 2 bonus to armor class. So that is really useful for a wizard because it really boosts our armor class. Then the medium armor, because we have a 14 dexterity, medium armor is going to give us the maximum amount of armor class we could expect to have. Now, we could technically put on heavy armor if we played the kind of cleric that gave us heavy armor proficiency, but it would slow our speed to 20 because we don't meet the strength requirements for heavy armor. So we could wear plate mail and a shield that would give us the best possible armor class, but because we have that 20-foot movement, I'm not a big fan of that. With half plate and a shield, it's going to be 1 lower armor class than that. So we're still going to have a very strong armor class using medium armor. So we're going to pick our divine domain, and it will be the knowledge domain. And I like the knowledge domain for a wizard, because knowledge domain, what it's going to do is it's going to give us blessings of knowledge. So at first level, we get 2 additional languages, and we also get expertise in 2 of the following skills: Arcana, History, Nature, or Religion. So as a wizard, having expertise in Arcana and History, I think is perfectly appropriate for a wizard. And both those are based on our intelligence. So we're probably even going to be better at them than the standard knowledge cleric would be. So again, the languages don't really matter. I will take Celestial, and I will take Draconic. Then we're going to get our 2 skills that are going to have expertise, and with a wizard, I'm pretty much always going to take Arcana and History. I just think they're really appropriate for wizard. Then we're going to get our regular cleric proficiencies, and of these, what I'll choose is Religion, and I'll choose Insight. So then we're going to pick our background, and this is an augur. We're doing Knowledge Cleric, Diviner, so I think kind of the obvious choice here is Sage. Now we already have both the skills for Sage, so we're going to get 2 additional skills. And the skills I would like to take here is maybe Acrobatics, just in case we're ever having to defend ourselves against a grapple. And I like Investigation, because Investigation is an intelligence-based skill, and it also is about gaining knowledge, which is our specialty. And now we get an additional 2 languages. So I do want to talk a little bit about languages here, because with this build, we're going to get our bonus language from being human, 2 bonus languages from Knowledge Cleric, and 2 bonus languages from the Sage background. So we are going to have a lot of languages. So this is a really nice build in a campaign where being able to communicate with various different creatures might be important. But then again, with this build, it doesn't really matter because I don't know what campaign you're going to be in. So I'm going to take Primordial and Undercommon. So now let's pick our spells. Now remember, these are cleric spells, so they are based on our wisdom. Our wisdom has a +1 modifier, so it's not that great. Now we're going to get Command and Identify as domain spells. Identify is a spell that is a ritual, and it is divination, so I think it's appropriate for this character. It's not one of my favorite spells, because often we can do the same thing with a short rest and still identify items. But because we're always going to have this prepared, it means that we could cast it with a spell slot, and then it's a 1-minute cast, or if we cast it as a ritual, it's a 10-minute cast. So in both cases, that is significantly faster than taking a short rest. And it's often something we could do right away, rather than waiting till the next time we're going to have a rest. Now, Command is normally an okay spell for clerics. Probably not a spell I'm going to cast, though, because it is going to be based on our wisdom. The enemy is going to get a saving throw, and the saving throw is not going to be that hard. So Command is one of those spells that'll be on my list, but I may never cast it. So we're going to pick 3 cantrips, and the first cantrip I'm going to pick is Guidance. And it's lovely to be able to get Guidance with a wizard because Guidance, of course, is a great spell. Anytime you're going to make an ability check and you know you're going to make an ability check, you can cast it first, and then you get a bonus plus 1d4 to the roll. Now you can't be concentrating on anything else. It is a concentration spell. But as far as cantrips go, it is one of my favorites in the game. The next one I'm going to learn is Light because this character is a human, so I don't have dark vision. Light is already a useful cantrip anyways, but even more so when often you require that light source. And then the final one I'll take is Mending. Now Mending is just one of those useful spells that comes up. Things get broken and then you can cast a Mending spell and fix them. Now, you will note I didn't take any attack cantrips, and it's for the same reason why I won't be casting the command spell. An attack cantrip using our clerical ability is not going to be very good for us. Now, because our wisdom is not great, we're actually only going to get 2 first level spells. The first one I'll take is Bless. Now, Bless is a great cleric spell, and it doesn't rely on our wisdom at all. So we're going to pick 3 characters. One of them might be ourselves, and all those characters are going to get a bonus 1d4 to attack rolls, as well as saving throws. And the second spell I'm going to prepare is Healing Word. Now, Healing Word does rely on our wisdom because it heals 1d4 plus our wisdom modifier. So because we only have a 13 wisdom, it's going to do 1d4 plus 1. But the fact is most of the time we cast Healing Word, it's when somebody went to 0 hit points, and the point of casting it is to bring them back to consciousness. Number 1, of course, then we don't have to worry about death saves, and number 2, they get back into the action. So even with our lower wisdom, we're still accomplishing that with a Healing Word spell, even though we're not healing as many hit points. Now, I just want to remind people that we can change these spells at every long rest. So if you are not getting a lot of use out of your Bless spell, and certainly at higher levels, you probably won't because you're going to be concentrating on other things, or you find that you want to maybe have a different heal spell than Healing Word, or maybe you don't want to worry about a healing spell at all. Maybe you have a party that's really strong in healing, then feel free to switch these up. So then we're going to go into our equipment, and what we want to do with our equipment is we'll take our standard starting equipment. We're going to start with a mace. This is automatic. I'm never going to use a mace, so you can sell it or give it to another party member or do whatever, or just have it by your side. But there's no point in you pulling out your mace and swinging with it. We have a negative strength modifier. We're going to be terrible with it. Then we're going to get our scale mail armor. Now, I didn't bother taking stealth with this character because I'm going to have disadvantage on stealth checks already because I'm wearing scale mail armor, and unlike some other wizard builds, I'm not going to have that 16 dexterity that a lot of them have, so I would already be one behind from that. And then the disadvantage, I'm just not going to be a very good stealthy character. So I'm not going to be worrying about maintaining my stealth with my armor. I'm just going to get the best armor class possible. That's going to be scale mail at first level. Then I'm going to be able to get either any simple weapon or a crossbow and 20 bolts. I'll take the crossbow and 20 bolts because at first level, I am not going to use a shield. At first level, I'm going to use a light crossbow in combat. And the reason for that is I don't have an attack cantrip. I could take a clerical attack cantrip and it would be terrible. It would be based off of 13. I'd rather have the crossbow that's based at least off of 14. Now, that's not a great attack at first level, but it's not terrible. We're still getting a +4 to hit for d8 +2 damage. It's a little behind what I'd expect from a martial character, but at least it gives us something we can do that is reasonable to contribute. And then we're going to get a shield and a holy symbol, and we'll throw the emblem on the shield. So at first level, I will not be wearing my shield, and I will not be wielding my mace, but I will be wearing my scale mail armor and using my crossbow. So first level is the weakest part for this character. Because we are an intelligence-focused character, and we are playing a wisdom-based class, we're not getting very much at first level. But the reason I won't like to take Cleric first is I can have a really good armor class at first level. Although I'm not using a shield, I still have an armor class of 16. That's a strong armor class for a wizard. And I'm not having to use any spell slots on anything like a mage armor. And then in combat, I can use my crossbow for +4 to hit, d8 +2 damage. It's not terrible. And I still have 2 spell slots I can use. And I can cast a Bless that does a pretty good party buff, and I have Healing Word in case somebody goes down. So this is not a useless character at first level. I've done this build before, and first level, it's not your strong point, but you're not terrible. You're going to find that you do just fine at first level. But we definitely find that things improve when we get to second level, because at second level now we can add Wizard. Now, I should mention right now that as soon as you take Wizard, you need to have either a component pouch or an arcane focus, because any spells you have that have a material component, you can't use your clerical focus to cast those spells. So if you haven't got one already, get one now. So as a wizard, we now have spells that are going to rely on our intelligence. So now is the point where we can start to do things that are going to require to hit rolls and that kind of thing. Now, because we are multi-classing, we end up cantrip heavy because we already have guidance, we already have mending, we already have light. Light and mending might have been spells I would take with my wizard class if I wasn't multi-classed. So I'm already looking at better utility with cantrips. So I can afford to go with 1 or 2 attack cantrips here pretty easily. But the first one, of course, I'm going to take is Minor Illusion. Now, Minor Illusion is likely the first wizard cantrip I would take with all 10 of these builds. The next cantrip we're going to want to take is an attack cantrip. Now, we could go 2 different ways. We could go either with the kind of cantrip that requires it to hit roll, like a Firebolt or a Ray of Frost, or we could go for a spell that requires a saving throw, like a Toll the Dead or Frostbite. Certainly with this character, I probably would want one of each. So what I'm going to be doing is, for my ranged spell attack, I will be doing a Ray of Frost. Now, Ray of Frost doesn't do the most damage. Firebolt will do the most damage. But Ray of Frost has a secondary effect where any enemy hit with a Ray of Frost has their speed reduced by 10. Now, because we are playing a God-style wizard, our tactical goal is to stay out of melee. So when there is an enemy that has some danger of rushing us, a Ray of Frost can often make it difficult for them to get to melee range with us. And I will take a Toll the Dead. And Toll the Dead is our best cantrip for damage when we are looking at a saving throw. So it uses a wisdom saving throw, and enemies take d8 damage unless they've been damaged already. If they've been damaged already, they take d12 damage. And frankly, targeting damaged enemies, for the most part, isn't that hard. There's usually somebody on the battlefield who is already damaged we can target with the Toll the Dead spell. Now, the reason I like to have one spell that requires a saving throw is because sometimes maybe we have disadvantage for some reason on attack rolls, or an enemy's under good cover, or maybe they have something like the shield spell and we're having trouble hitting them, or maybe they just have a really good armor class, and Toll the Dead takes care of all those things because we're not targeting armor class anymore. But when we have an enemy that doesn't have a great armor class, those spells that require the to hit roll, I find, work more often. It seems to be more likely, in my experience, that enemies will make their saving throw than they will be able to avoid an attack roll. So I like to have one of each. And I've also got 2 different kinds of damage here. I've got cold damage and necrotic damage. So if there's an enemy that is resistant or immune to one of them, I can use the other one instead. Now, once we get to a high level, we're probably not using attack cantrips anymore, but we're probably also not using cantrips much anymore. So it's not such a big deal. So then we're going to pick our first level spells, and we're going to pick 6 of them. First level wizard starts with 6 first level spells. We can only prepare 4 of these spells, but because a wizard can cast ritual spells that are not prepared, this ends up being a pretty easy list to fill up. The first one I will always take is Find Familiar. Again, this is probably going to be the first selection for every wizard I do. And now I'm going to get 5 more selections. So I will take the Shield spell and the Absorb Element spell. So these are both going to boost my defense with this character. The next spell I'm going to take is Tasha's Hideous Laughter. And I haven't talked about this spell as much, so let me talk about it right now. This is a 30-foot range, 1-action casting. It is going to use my concentration. You pick a creature of your choice, and what happens is they make a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail that saving throw, they fall prone and are incapacitated. And at the end of each of its turns, or if it takes damage, it's going to get additional saving throw. If damage triggered the saving throw, it gets advantage on that saving throw. Now, one of the reasons I like this spell. I tend to avoid spells that target single enemies, and if they make a saving throw, nothing happens. But this is only a first level spell, and it has a pretty debilitating effect even at higher levels. So if we are a higher level caster and we hit a powerful creature with a Tasha's Hideous Laughter and it fails its saving throw, assuming it doesn't have legendary resistance, it's prone and incapacitated. So it is out of the fight for at least a round, and we can concentrate on other creatures, and I've only used a first level slot. So in terms of using resources, it's pretty good that way. But the other thing I like here is because I'm going to be going Diviner, I will be getting Portent, and we'll go over that when we talk about Portent. But spells that target that single creature where if they make a save nothing happens are a little more valuable when we're playing a Diviner. So we're going to get 2 more spells, and I want to take a couple rituals here. The first one I'm going to take is Detect Magic, super useful ritual, and it's divination, so it fits my character concept. And I'm going to take Comprehend Languages. Now I have a number of languages, but you will find that when you're playing, so many languages come up where you didn't even know they existed. Comprehend Languages is going to allow you to understand. It's going to allow you to read those languages. So when we go into our character again, what we want to do is we want to go to our equipment, and now we are going to equip our shield. And we're going to unequip our crossbow, because now we have ranged cantrips that we can do for damage. Now, arguably, now I haven't done the math, but arguably even with a 14 dexterity, that crossbow is likely going to do more damage than those ranged cantrips. I think it would. But because we can now wear our shield and cast those cantrips, we're getting a +2 to armor class. So our armor class goes from 16 to 18, and whatever slight difference or slight advantage there might be to using a crossbow, I think is offset by that armor class increase. Now I really like this level for this build, the 1 Cleric, 1 Wizard, because there is a lot of versatility this character now has. So we have our great armor class, but we also have the shield spell. So we can get that 18 to a 23 quite easily. We're going to have the shield in one hand, the other hand is going to be free for casting or accessing material components. Of course, once we get an arcane focus for that hand, we don't have to worry because of Warcaster. We're still going to be able to cast our spells. But look at the quantity of spells we have to choose from here. We have 6 cantrips, and they're all good cantrips. And that is more than any single class character is going to have. Being able to combine guidance and minor illusion on the same character is always great too. We have a couple different attack cantrips we can use when we don't have anything else to do. But there's a lot of other things we can do. We have 3 first level spells, and with Arcane Recovery we can get a 4th first level spell. Now we might use one on a shield or an Absorb Elements, but Bless is still a really good party buff for us. Healing Word is still something we might want to do with our bonus action, especially if an ally goes down. And we might do our Tasha's Hideous Laughter if we want to spend a resource to have a bigger impact on an opponent. Now we don't have Portent yet, so Tasha's Hideous Laughter is a gamble. But being that it's either Tasha's Hideous Laughter or probably a cantrip that's going to do probably pretty crappy damage, it's probably a good gamble to take when you're taking on something that's tough, or especially if there's a couple different enemies that are tough, so you can take one out and deal with the other one. But remember, even if it's a single enemy and you drop them, you still are making them prone. That's going to give your party members advantage on attacking them. And for utility, we have a lot of rituals we have available to us. We have Comprehend Languages, Identify, Detect Magic, and Find Familiar. So we're well covered in utility. Now, I have actually prepared Detect Magic at this point because I had more preparations than I needed. So if we wanted to cast Detect Magic with just a spell slot so that it was faster, we could do that. So the 3rd level is when we're going to officially become a Diviner. So the arcane tradition we will take is Diviner. Again, I find that when I talk to people, this tends to be the #1 choice for players who have played these various subclasses, including me. And the reason why is Portent. So this is what Portent does. Starting at 2nd level when you choose this school, glimpses of the future begin to press on your awareness. When you finish a long rest, you roll 2 d20s. You record the 2 numbers you rolled. You can replace any attack roll, saving throw, or an ability check made by you or a creature that you can see with one of these foretelling rolls. You must choose to do so before the roll, and you can replace the roll in this way once per turn. So a couple things to unpack here. Attack rolls, saving throws, or ability checks means basically anytime a d20 is rolled, we can replace it with one of these rolls. It does not have to be an ally, it does not have to be an enemy, and it can be yourself as well. So it's another way that we're shoring up our concentration saves. If we are worried about failing a concentration save, we could use a portent that we know is going to be high enough. And ideally, with portent, I love to roll really low or really high. Because if we get really high, we can take something that likely wouldn't have been successful and make it successful. Or we might go into combat where we really want to win initiative and we can really boost our initiative. Or we might have a case where an enemy is attacking us or a fellow PC with a spell, and we really want to make that saving throw, and we can make sure to make that saving throw. If one of those d20s is a 20, we can use it to provide an ally a guaranteed critical hit. Now, ones are lovely as well because they're basically a guaranteed failure. So if we target a creature with a spell and then we make it saving throw a 1, even if it has a big bonus, it's almost certainly going to fail. Only with legendary resistance or advantage can it get around that. But even if I roll 10s or 11s, they're still really useful. In fact, in some ways, a 10 or 11 might even be more useful than the high or low numbers, because often that 10 or 11, number one, will be enough to make an enemy fail their saving throw guaranteed, and number two is often enough to make sure you make your saving throw guaranteed, because often the odds are in the favor of the PCs. So when we have a DC of 13 or 14 and we take a creature and give it a 10 on its saving throw, unless it has a big bonus on that saving throw, it's guaranteed to fail. Likewise, if I'm making a concentration save and I've got a +2 to my saving throw, then if I give myself a 10 on the roll, that's a 12, that's probably going to be guaranteed to succeed, unless I took more than 24 points of damage with a single attack. And Portent doesn't use our bonus action, doesn't use our regular action, it doesn't use our reaction. It's free. We can do it, and we can still use our reactions and bonus actions for other things. It doesn't matter whether we've acted in combat yet, or if it's our turn. We can use Portent whenever we want, with the only restriction we can't use both dice on the same turn. So I'll tell you this, if you haven't played a Diviner before, this is really, really fun, and it's super effective right at 2nd level, and it is super effective at 20th level. This will never ever become dull, and it will never ever become weak. It's always going to be great, and it starts right now. So when I'm talking about spells like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, that's why I'm a little more inclined to take them with the Diviner, because often I'm going to have a Portent that is going to guarantee the failure of the enemy. So now instead of Tasha's Hideous Laughter being a gamble, it's a sure thing. I'm going to get 2 additional 1st level spells, and the spells I'm going to take are Featherfall. Now, Featherfall might be a bit of a surprise because when I talked about 1st level spells, it wasn't one of the first ones I mentioned. It is a spell that is super circumstantial. But here's the thing, what's going on with this character in particular is I have a ton of spells with 1st level spell preparations, because I've got my 2 Cleric spell preparations in addition to all the Wizard spell preparations. So there is a lot of prepared spells here. But the spells I'm going to be casting most of the time are Shield, Absorb Elements, Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Now I could take another big gun spell, like I could take something like a Sleep, but at 3rd level, Sleep is already becoming less and less valuable and less useful. I could take something like a Thunder Wave, but again, Thunder Wave number 1 requires that we get in close, which is what we're trying to avoid doing, and number 2, 2d8 damage at this level, also not that big a deal. So I have all these preparations, and I don't have a lot of spell slots, so I'm going to want some spells that are more circumstantial. And Featherfall is an example of a spell that almost never is useful, but when it is useful, it's super, super useful. And remember, it's not just saving you, it's saving the entire party. And the other spell I'm going to take is Magic Missile. Now, we have range cantrips. damage isn't really our specialty, so Magic Missile might seem like an odd choice here. But there's a couple reasons why I want Magic Missile. The first is cantrip damage isn't very good, but a Magic Missile, even cast at first level, we can expect it to do about 10.5 points of damage on average. Always hits, there's no saving throw, almost nothing is immune or resistant to force damage, so it almost always works. And we can separate targets if we want to. The other reason I want Magic Missile is because I want a first level spell that can be cast with a second level slot and still be useful. And the reality is, right now at third level, I'm going to have 2 second level slots and no second level spells. So this is going to happen with every odd level. I'm going to have spell slots that are higher than my highest level spell. So I'm going to want at least one spell that I can scale. And Magic Missile is a scaling spell. So it does 10.5 points of damage, but if I cast it as a second level spell, then it's going to do 14 points of damage. 14 points of damage guaranteed on average. Not too bad damage for this level. So it becomes kind of our big gun spell other than Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Certainly the big gun spell we would use with our second level slot. If you don't want Magic Missile, look at other spells that scale with level. And often those are your damage spells, especially with our first level spells. We got Magic Missile, we've got Ice Knife, we've got Thunder Wave, we've got Chromatic Orb, all damage spells. Now, Color Spray and Sleep also scale with level, but their scaling goes down so fast that I'm not sure it even offsets the amount that we're losing each level with additional hit points of creatures we're coming up against. So when we're looking at our prepared spells at third level, we're going to have Absorb Elements prepared, Feather Fall, Magic Missile, Shield, and Tasha's Hideous Laughter. So with our character now, when we don't want to use a spell in combat and we're just looking for a way to do damage, we have our Ray of Frost. But when we are spellcasting, now we have a fair number of spells. We have 4 first level spells and 2 second level spells. And we also get an additional 2 spell levels back when we take a short rest with Arcane Recovery. So now we're getting to the point where spell slots aren't as terrible as they were at super low levels. But we only have first level spells to choose from. So we are going to be casting Shield and Absorb Elements when we're targeted with appropriate kinds of attacks. Hopefully we're not targeted with a lot of attacks with the Diviner because we're not going into melee, because we're trying to keep our distance from the enemies. Magic Missile gives us a ranged attack that does pretty good damage and can use our second level slot effectively. And Tasha's Hideous Laughter is our option if we're using a first level spell slot in combat. And because we have Portent, we can potentially have that enemy automatically fail their saving throw. And Tasha's Hideous Laughter plus a Portent that guarantees a failed saving throw is probably more powerful than a second level Magic Missile. So when we go to 4th level, we're going to get our wizard up to 3rd level. And that means we are going to have those second level spells to use the second level spell slots with. So we're going to get 2 second level spells. The first one will be Web. This is going to be, whenever we're talking about a God Wizard, this is going to be my second level spell choice, because unlike some other spell levels like 3rd level where there's multiple good spells to choose from and maybe one I prefer a little bit, with second level, Web is really just a lot better at the God Wizard style battlefield control than anything else at the level. So I'm pretty much always going to take that. And then the second one I'm going to take is Suggestion, because Suggestion is another spell that is going to provide a saving throw, but if they fail that saving throw, it can be very effective. Now, the play you get on Suggestion depends on your table, because, and I've talked about this more in detail when on spell videos, but Suggestion has some subjectivity to the arbitration, and so different DMs are going to play it differently, but Suggestion, at least you can usually use it to get an enemy to run away from a combat, and we can do that automatically again with our Portent. So the big difference here now is because we have actual second level spells to use those second level slots, generally speaking, spells are always better when they're cast at their appropriate level. So a 5th level spell is usually more powerful than a 3rd level spell cast with a 5th level slot. And so we see a pretty big power boost here, even though we could cast second level spell slots before. being able to cast Magic Missile with a second level spell slot isn't nearly as good as being able to cast Web or Suggestion. Now, Suggestion is probably going to be your best option when we're talking about very few enemies, and then Web is a better option against multiple enemies. Web is also a better option if we win initiative, while Suggestion maybe when things get more chaotic and it's harder to place a web. Also keep in mind now we have 3 second level slots, so we can be casting second level spells in multiple combats here. So this is tier 1 of the Augur. So if you want to see how tier 2 works or tier 3 and 4 work, you will need to click the next video. So for tier 1, the Augur, that's it. See you soon.